One day, you wake up and realize you're no longer needed. At first, it's small, a missed phone call, a visit that doesn't happen, the conversations that grow shorter, colder, more distant. You tell yourself it's just life. They're busy, they have their own families now, their own problems, but deep down, something feels different. Weeks pass, then months, and then one day it hits you. The silence isn't temporary, it's becoming permanent. You sacrificed everything. Your youth, your energy, your best years. You held them through their worst nights, gave them the opportunities you never had, fought battles they never even saw. And now you feel like a stranger in their lives, a guest in a home that used to be yours, a reminder of something they no longer have time for. And that is where most parents get it wrong. The uncomfortable truth. Why this happens. A growing number of seniors are finding themselves isolated in their later years, with adult children prioritizing work, relationships, and personal goals over family bonds. They say they love you, that they'll visit soon, that they'll call back, but the truth? You are no longer their priority. And that's where the real danger begins. Because what no one tells you is that being ignored isn't just painful, it's deadly. And yet, millions of parents still sit in silence, waiting for love that may never return. The biggest mistake parents make. Most aging parents do the same thing when they feel ignored. They wait, they hope, they try harder, they overcompensate. They think, if I just remind them how much I love them, they'll come back. But here's what they don't realize. Chasing after the past only pushes them further away. You can't force love, you can't demand respect. And the more you try to hold on, the more they pull away. But what if I told you there's another way, a way to shift the balance, to make them notice you again, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire? A way to regain your peace and your power. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in strength. The moment you stop waiting for them is the moment they start wondering where you went. Because here's the truth, people only appreciate what they think they can't have. You have two choices. Keep waiting for them to notice you, or start living so fully that they can't ignore you anymore. Because at the end of life, no one regrets losing people who didn't value them. They regret the time wasted trying to make them care. So what will you do now? I once met a woman named Margaret. She was 78 years old, a mother of 3, a grandmother of 5, a woman who had spent decades of her life doing everything for her children. The sleepless nights, the scraped knees, the school lunches packed with love, the sacrifices no one ever saw. She used to believe that love, real love, was something that never faded, that family was forever. But as the years passed, something changed. The phone calls became shorter, the visits became rare, the conversations forced. She told herself they were busy, that they would call when they had time, that she would always be important to them, the way they were important to her. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had become an afterthought. The most painful part of aging isn't the wrinkles. It isn't the aching joints. It isn't even the fear of what comes next. It's the realization that the people you lived for have found a way to live without you. And the worst part? You never see it coming. No one warns you. No one prepares you for the moment your children stop looking at you the same way. When their patience grows thinner, when their words become less kind, when your presence is no longer a priority, but an obligation. It doesn't happen overnight, it happens slowly. The phone calls go from daily to weekly, then monthly, then only on holidays if that. The visits go from long conversations to quick check-ins. And one day, you wake up and realize you are no longer part of their world. Why does this happen? This is the question millions of aging parents ask themselves every single day. Did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? Could I have changed the outcome? And here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. It's not always about you. They tell themselves they'll call tomorrow, that there's still time, that you understand, that you'll always be there. But slowly, you become a memory instead of a presence, a name in their phone instead of a person in their life. Most parents, when faced with this reality, do one of two things. They beg for attention, or they suffer in silence. But what if I told you? There's a third option. What if I told you that you have more power in this situation than you think? That the way you respond could change everything? It's time to wake up. Most parents, when they feel forgotten, do the same thing. They wait. They wait for the phone call, the visit, the I love you that never comes. They convince themselves that if they're patient enough, if they show enough love, if they remind their children just how much they've given, that one day the respect will return. But what if I told you that's the biggest mistake you can make? Many elderly parents believe that if they just wait long enough, their children will wake up and realize how much they're needed. But the truth? That almost never happens. For decades, you poured everything into your children, your time, your energy, your sacrifices. You thought that love was enough to create loyalty, that devotion would guarantee respect. But here's the truth no one tells you. You cannot force someone to value you. Respect is not something you earn through suffering. It is not something you should have to beg for. And yet, so many aging parents do just that. They chase love, thinking that if they just hold on a little longer, things will go back to the way they were. But the harsh truth? They are not coming back in the way you hope. So what do? The most powerful decision you will ever make is to stop waiting for validation from people who have already decided not to give it to you. Let me say this again. You do not need their approval to live fully. When aging parents stop centering their lives around absent children, they regain their dignity, their joy, and most importantly, their sense of self. Here's what they never tell you. Peace doesn't come from forcing respect. It doesn't come from demanding love. It comes from the moment you decide that your worth is not tied to whether or not your children acknowledge it. The moment you stop chasing the past is the moment you step into your future. Because here's the secret. When you stop needing their validation, that's when they start wondering where you went. You are enough, whether they see it or not. Most aging parents, when faced with disrespect or distance from their children, ask the same question: what did I do wrong? They replay old conversations, analyze every mistake, wondering if this is punishment for something they failed to do. But what if I told you, it's not always about you? A shocking study revealed that in most cases of parental estrangement, the reason wasn't abuse. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't even conflict. It was internal battles that had nothing to do with the parent at all. Guilt, shame, personal failures. Many adult children pull away from their parents because they can't bear to be reminded of who they were or who they haven't become. Imagine this. Your child is struggling. Maybe their career isn't where they thought it would be. Maybe their marriage is failing. Maybe they look at themselves in the mirror and feel like they've let their own life slip away. And when they hear your voice, the voice of the person who raised them, who sacrificed for them, who had expectations for them, it doesn't bring comfort, it brings guilt. So they withdraw, not because you failed them, not because they don't love you, but because they don't love themselves. And yet, parents take it personally. They think if they respected me, they would call. If they loved me, they would show up. But what if I told you? Sometimes, their absence isn't rejection. It's avoidance of their own reflection. Sometimes, the best response isn't demanding respect. It's understanding what's happening beneath the surface. When you stop making their absence about you, you begin to understand something powerful. People treat others based on what's happening inside of them, not because of what those people deserve. And that's where so many parents get stuck. They demand respect, thinking it will fix the relationship. But respect isn't something you can force. It's something people can only give when they are whole enough to offer it. So instead of asking, why are they doing this to me? Ask a different question. What are they battling within themselves? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop taking their struggles as proof of your failure. For years, you've been holding on, hoping, waiting, convincing yourself that if you just try harder, if you just show more love, if you just hold on a little longer, they'll come back. They'll respect you. They'll treat you the way they should. But here's the truth no one tells you. The tighter you hold, the further they pull away. The real problem isn't their absence. The real problem is the weight of your expectations. There was a man named George. He was 85 years old. A father of 4. A man who had spent decades believing that his children were his world. That everything he had done, every sacrifice he had made, would one day be recognized. That in his old age, he would be surrounded by love, by family, by the people who owed him everything. But life had other plans. His children drifted away. They had families, careers, lives that no longer revolved around him. At first, he was patient. Then he was bitter. And then, one day, he realized something. He realized that the moment he stopped waiting for their approval, he started truly living. Because here's the truth. Your happiness was never meant to be in their hands. Imagine you're holding a rope, desperately pulling, hoping your child will come closer. You pull harder, thinking if you just show enough love, if you just say the right things, if you just prove your worth, they'll come back. But what happens when you pull a rope too hard? You don't bring them closer, you push them further away. But what happens if you just let go? The answer is simple. You become free. You have two choices. Keep waiting, keep pulling on that rope, hoping for something that may never come, or stop, walk away. Not in anger, not in regret, but in peace. Because here's what they don't tell you. Life isn't over just because they don't call. Love isn't gone just because they don't say it. You are still here. And that means there is still time. Because when you let go of expectation, you gain everything else. Live as if you owe nothing to the past and everything to the moment in front of you. What if I told you that the best way to rebuild a broken relationship is to walk away from it first? Most parents, when they feel neglected, do the opposite of what actually works. They call more, they remind their children of their sacrifices, they express their pain, hoping that guilt will bring them back. But what if I told you that's not how human psychology works? One of the most powerful forces in relationships isn't closeness, it's absence. People don't value what they feel they will always have. They value what they believe they might lose. There's a rule in psychology: people do not chase what is always available. When you stop making yourself always there, something interesting happens. The people who once ignored you start to notice your absence. The child who once took you for granted starts to wonder where you went. Because here's what no one tells you. Sometimes distance creates value. When you are always the one initiating, always the one chasing, always the one making it easy, there is no urgency, no reason for them to act. But the moment you stop, the moment you shift your energy somewhere else, they are forced to wonder where you went. They start to realize that the person they once took for granted might not always be there. Creating distance often makes people value you more. When you shift your focus from waiting for them to value you to valuing yourself first, everything changes. They start to wonder where you went. They start to question their choices. They start to realize what they stand to lose. Because when something is always there, it is easy to ignore. But when something starts to disappear, people pay attention. And here's where things get really interesting. Most parents do the opposite of what actually works. They beg for love. They demand respect. They chase, not realizing that the most powerful move they could ever make is to stop. And when you stop waiting for them, that's when they start looking for you. What happens when you finally stop chasing their respect? Most parents believe that the only way to fix a broken relationship is to try harder, to reach out more, to remind them of everything they've done. But what if that's the very thing that's pushing them further away? And here's where things get really interesting. The parents who finally reclaim their dignity, they don't beg, they don't chase, they do something entirely different. Why do some parents reclaim their dignity, while others remain trapped in disappointment? The moment you shift your focus from them to yourself, everything begins to change. But what does that actually look like? What does it mean to stop waiting, to stop chasing, and more importantly, what happens next? The moment you implement this next step, you'll start to see everything change. At the end of life, no one regrets what they owned. No one lies awake at night thinking about the money they made, the titles they held, or even the sacrifices they gave. They regret the time wasted, waiting. Waiting for people to change, waiting for apologies that never came, waiting for love that should have been given freely, but never was. So let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Are you living the years you have left on your own terms? Or are you still hoping for something that may never come? Because here's the truth. Life isn't waiting for you to decide. The years will pass, with or without your permission. And the only question that will matter in the end is this: did you truly live? It's time to live while you still can. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone out there needs to hear this today. Maybe it's a friend, a family member, or someone who feels forgotten and alone. Sharing this video could be the spark that helps them find their strength again. Now, I have a question for you, and I'd love to hear your answer. What's the most valuable lesson you've learned about relationships as you age? Is it something you wish you knew earlier, or a truth that changed everything for you? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Your wisdom could be the message someone else needs to hear. And if you found value in this video, take a moment to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This way, you'll never miss out on our next message of wisdom, strength, and hope. We're building a community of people who refuse to let life pass them by, who choose to live, to love, and to grow, even in the later years, because life isn't over until we decide it is. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Remember, every moment is a gift, so live fully, love deeply, and never stop learning. Until next time, take care and keep living.